Hello, it's Davey Mooney coming to you from the University of North Texas, where I run the jazz guitar program. I'm a Benedetto artist, Sunnyside Records artist. Got my Sunnyside CDs up here as always, and I'm going to record a new one in just like a week or so. I'm going down to São Paulo, Brazil, to Campinas to record with the cats down there that I perform with whenever I go to São Paulo. Got a Mel Bay book, Personalizing Jazz Vocabulary, Mel Bay improv book, and ta-da! The new one is out, y'all. It's been out for a few weeks, but I finally got my hard copies, and I'm going to talk about the book a little bit today, give you a little preview of the content. Man, it's a lot in here. It's like 113 pages, I think, and it's, as you can see, it's just chock full of notes, etudes, improvisations, a lot of explanatory text, and also a lot of what do you call them, neck diagrams, chord boxes, explaining the shapes that I use to improvise. And I think I'll put it up here, right? I feel like it needs, I'll rearrange this later, but for now it'll get a center stage for this video. Into the Labyrinth, an anatomy of position playing for jazz guitar. Online audio, there's a ton of tracks. I think there's 60 tracks in all. Practice recordings and recordings of me playing all the etudes and the improvisations. Real good studio quality with maestros Matt Young on drums, Mike Luzecki on bass, the award-winning Mike Luzecki trio here in DFW. Anyway, I'll tell you a little bit about how the book came about. So I had this other book, Personalizing Jazz Vocabulary, that's been out now for, I guess, like 3 years or so. And it kind of distills my philosophy teaching improvisation to, say, intermediate to advanced players about taking fragments of jazz vocabulary, tropes, fragments of the language that you hear in all the classic jazz solos from the repertoire, and trying to incorporate those little fragments into your improvising so that you feel like they're personalized, that you can integrate them in there and feel like they're part of your own expression. And it talks about the method that I use to do that. And as always, when I start writing these books, it's very personal. There's like I try to describe the personal journey that I took to get to where I am today and how these things fit into there. So in that book, excuse me, it's very, it's 108 degrees here, y'all, and the air quality is not great, so I got a little bit of sniffles. So if I sniffle, please forgive me. There's one. So I had this first book, and I'm very blessed here at UNT. I get to teach students that play on such a high level, and a lot of them come to me. They've already kind of got the neck figured out, and I don't feel like I need to break it down if we're playing a tune like, say, Lady Bird. The great Ted Dameron tune that's a fixture of jazz education, C major, F minor, B flat. They know how to play that on the whole neck of the guitar, at least as far as I can tell, to the point where I don't have to stop and be like, hey, wait a second, do you know how to play that chord right there? So I have students like that, many of the students I have here, and so I talk to them, sort of teach them out of my experience. We look at different repertoire, we work on composing, we talk about phrasing, kind of more dare I say, higher level things that you think about improvising once you've got the basics down. But I had a semester here, I guess it was maybe a year and a half ago, where I had a series of players who were graduating who I hadn't got to spend enough time with because, the competition is fierce, you guys, everywhere, UNT as well. There's more students than I can teach, like, every semester. But I had a bunch of them, and I realized that there were some holes in people's playing, like they could play on such and such a chord here, but then if the chord switched, I could see them jumping around, and I realized that, the nuts and bolts of how I figured out playing just the neck of the guitar, understanding the fretboard, where everything is, was probably pretty important, and that I should lay that out in a systematic way. And then I started, as one does, I started to reminisce and look back and try to remember everything that I did. And there were certain key moments in my journey as a guitarist and jazz musician that were very important. And I'll talk about a few of them now that are in the book. It's, like I said, it's 113 pages of solid content, so I won't go through everything. But basically, I remember, and I talk about this in the other book as well, when I was 12, 13, and I went to summer jazz camp at Loyola University in New Orleans. Shout out to Loyola and their great jazz camp. We just finished our jazz camp here last week at UNT, so it was kind of funny with this book coming out and me thinking about my jazz camp years, etc. Anyway, but I remember great guitarist John Eubanks. Shout out to John Eubanks. He handed me a sheet of paper that had 5 scale shapes on it. It had I don't remember what was written on the paper other than the shapes themselves, but it basically represented the caged system. And I remember I took that home that night and for some reason decided that I was going to learn it. I guess we all wish that's what we would do with every piece of information we're given, but I was really like on a tear. And I remember I spent 2 hours, and I tell in master classes and things, I tell students that was the best 2 hours or most effective 2 hours of practice I ever did, and I think that's true. Because I memorized the shapes, and I memorized them by the fingerings. Like, so for instance, and these are probably familiar to a lot of you that learn the caged system, but so down here, remember I got 7 strings, so you kind of ignore that one, but this shape right here, that's all the notes of C major in that part of the neck. You don't have to start on C and end on C necessarily because you're going to be improvising if you're playing jazz, so you just need all the notes under your fingers there. There's that shape, there's this shape, this shape, and then I had this one. I think this is kind of like a mixture. Not everybody does this fingering, but I had already learned that one, so I didn't need to really do that one, and then there's this one. And it takes you back to the beginning. And it pretty much covers the neck. And I remember at that jazz camp, my combo was playing like modal tunes like So What. And so the next day I went back and I could play C major on the whole neck of the guitar rather than just like, playing the pentatonic that we all know is, jazz guitar players coming from rock and blues and stuff and trying to add in the other notes. And the other thing I remember that I did clearly in that 2 hours was memorize the fingerings, and I realized that it was important not just to sort of know what it looks like in certain areas of the neck with the dots on the fretboard, but to know that, okay, if I play here, if this is C down here, if I want to play G down here, it's actually very similar and easy to get confused. And then here's F down here, right? Oops. Here's E flat. B flat, all those. I memorized them by the finger pattern, like 1 4 1 2 4 1 2 4, etc. And that was really helpful. To a certain extent, after those 2 hours of practice, I could improvise on tunes. So going back to something like Ladybird, if I were here in the middle of the neck, I could play C major for those first 2 measures, and then when I need to do a 2-5. F minor 7, B flat 7, that's the E flat major scale, so I could play that right here without having to, just jump to play the same shape. And then when there's a 2-5 in A flat, that's right here, right? And then when there's a 2-5 in G, I could use that same shape since it's only half step away, and then back to C. So, without having to jump around, right? And so that really helped me to start to just know where the notes are on the neck, be able to noodle around in the correct key areas. Although, of course, it doesn't really sound much like jazz, for lack of a better term, when you're just noodling around in key areas. But that's kind of what the second book was about. How you go from being able to do that to incorporating some jazz vocabulary. But of course, in the first book, I didn't talk about how I figured out where the notes were. So, hence this book. But so that was one thing, and like I said, it was really, really helpful, probably the most effective practice I did. I remember at that point, I started taking lessons with Hank Mackey, and we would break down tunes into their key areas, and I was able to play in the right key areas. And I remember the other thing that he showed me that really helped me start to connect things this way, because when I improvise, I don't just go in one position and then jump to the next. I kind of try to go both ways. Sort of diagonal, in every way across or through the labyrinth of the fretboard. So I remember doing this, like the diatonic 7 chords of C major on different string sets, like. And this is all in the book, y'all. If I rush through it, you can check out the book. It's all broken down, stuff like that. So then if I want to connect, say I want to play in C or D Dorian on the whole neck of the guitar and kind of connect things more fluidly, I got right, and go from the scale, the caged shapes, and also go this way with the arpeggio shapes. And I also remember learning about the upper extensions of the chords, the fact that if I play an E minor 7 arpeggio like this, if the bass player plays a C, it's a C major 7. If the bass player plays an A, it's like the top part of an A minor 11. Things like that. And there's a chart in the book based on, I remember Hank had me write out a chart in a notebook, saying like the root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th of all the 7th chords and things like that. So that helped me. Then I had the fretboard, we're skipping. There's a lot of pain and suffering and experimentation and, practice time that I'm glossing over, of course. But, I had that down. I could play diatonically, say if I'm playing Ladybird, using arpeggio shapes in different places and linking that together with the cage positions. So then, the other thing that I found was really important to me to get the chromaticism that I wanted and the long eighth note lines that I was hearing on the records of the people I was listening to at the time. Wes Montgomery, 60s Joe Pass, Pat Martino, Steve Mazikowski, some Matheny question and answer type Matheny. I really like the long lines, Kurt Rosewinkle on Into It. That came a little later. I was already in college then. But, those type of players, I wanted to get the long lines and that you hear saxophone players playing, great pianists. And so what I used to do, and this is, again, not only me, I didn't invent this by any stretch, but I would practice playing on these tunes in all eighth notes. Sometimes trying to stay in one position, but also moving around. But in the book, what I have is, I basically just covered the introductory chapter, but I have basically 5 tunes, 5 chord progressions that I pick. And for each of those 5 chord progressions, for each chunk of the neck, and I divide the neck into 5 different chunks based on those cage shapes, but when tunes modulate a lot, it's not exactly, you can't exactly say 4 frets, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 6, but it's some chunk of the neck. I have a chorus etude, all eighth note etude at a slow tempo, which again, there's the track showing, it's written out, and then the track has a practice for you to practice improvising in all eighth notes, and it also has me playing the one that's in the book. So I have an all eighth note etude in each position, so 5 etudes for each chord progression, of which there are 5. So 5's like the magic number. And then also I improvise a chorus in each position of the 5 positions for each tune. So that's how we get to 60 tracks or whatever. I don't know, somehow. There's a lot of tracks. But so for instance, if I were trying to, and Lady Bird isn't in the book, I'm just using that as another example of a tune. If I wanted to play all eighth notes, right? And I can kind of do that all day. I can do that all day. I might get tired after a few hours of doing it, but I used to do it a lot with the metronome. And I developed the ability to, sort of a muscle memory in my left hand, to kind of know how to get from one arpeggio, one scale shape, to the next, and to target chord tones. So, like I said, all that is in the book. There's 25 etudes for, 25 etudes, 5 times 5. That makes sense, right? Well, math, I didn't study math, but it's all in there. And then 25 transcriptions. That's how we get to 50. 25 improvisations in positions, and then the practice tracks. But what I also do is I show the shapes that I use to improvise, because I found that as I have been doing this for so long, what I'm playing off of right there isn't exactly the scale shapes, and it's not exactly just those arpeggio things that ascending diatonic 7 arpeggios that I used to practice. It's kind of narrowed down to very specific grips and shapes in each area of the neck. So for instance, if I'm right here on Ladybird playing C major, I'm gonna play this. And I'm going to ornament it chromatically. And then when it goes to F minor, I'm using this shape. It's like an A flat major 7, then B flat 7. Here's B flat 7, right? I might do this. It's very specific, and I'm going to go to that every time. I'm never going to play it the exact same way, and I'm going to ornament it differently and use all those other techniques. When the B flat minor comes in that progression, E flat 7, A flat, A minor, D7, right? There's shapes. So those are, I don't want to show you exactly because it's in the book, written in neck diagrams, chord boxes showing you where things are. And I was real kind of exhaustive with that process, because that's really what I'm using, when I play. And the good news is that they all repeat, right? So if you're down here playing C major, if you were playing C major up here, there's a limited number of shapes, right? They're going to recur because there's only major 7, minor 7, and dominant 7 chords. I'm going to play D minor right here. That's the same exact shape I'm going to use if I were playing F minor up here, right? And like I said, it's kind of based on the 5. It started with the 5 cage positions. It was connected with those arpeggio shapes, and now it's like, because I used to practice playing in all 8th notes and positions, very specific arpeggio grips and arpeggio fragments. So that's basically it, y'all. Like I said, there's 5 chapters. There's the introduction where I talk about the cage shapes and the arpeggio shapes, and then the 5 chapters on specific progressions with 5 all 8th note etudes, kind of based on a little tribute to Barry Galbraith, because I used to play through the Barry Galbraith books all the time, and they have the all 8th note studies in the fingerboard workout and the melodic and harmonic minor modes book, and there's also the guitar improv books. It's kind of a little tribute to that, but along with it, rather than focus, his etudes are positional. He's very specific about how he wants to shift from one area of the neck to another, whereas I kind of focus on, in this area, what do I do? And the etudes that I do are confined to certain areas of the neck, like by design. So anyway, I encourage y'all to check it out. Hopefully that gets you excited about the book. I'm excited about the book. Spent a lot of time on it, full of content. It'll keep you busy, y'all. And like I said, there's practice tracks, there's a lot of online audio, and Into the Labyrinth, an anatomy of position playing for jazz guitar from Mel Bay. You can Google it. I'll put links and stuff to it as well. So, all right, thanks a lot. See you soon. Bye.